We're here. We're live. It's us.
Oh,
Hello.
hi.
All right. Well, how are you doing, Christine? This is Christine. Wait, where's my hands go? Okay, this is Christine from An Autistic Reader,
Hello.
my co-host for the Narnia Readalong.
Mhm.
And how are you doing? Are you excited?
I am. I am excited. I am. I've thoroughly enjoyed what I've read, and we'll talk about that more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did finally finish Prince Caspian.
hmm
I think I got myself in trouble with rereading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because it wasn't a bad thing, but it definitely cut my limited time. And then I was like, oh no, I got to read the other one too.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So it helps that we had some more time though, and
Mhm.
appreciate you for being flexible.
Oh no, thank you. I needed that too.
Yeah,
So that extra time.
yeah.
hmm
I know for both of us, it was like, oh, and that's a little too, there's too much going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Okay.
What did you think? What was your overall impression, like just off the bat?
I I really enjoyed it. I remember having the books individually as a youth and not really reading them, maybe reading the first couple of chapters in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I remember at that age being kind of bored with it. And as I've gotten older, I've realized I enjoy classics a lot more. So upon like my first complete read of it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was very sweet. And I know that C.S. Lewis likes to put his spiritual opinions and things and mask them. And so having some of the same opinions as he does, I was able to pick up on some of his hints and or whatever you you want to call them.
You
Mhm.
mean like the because he used a lot of religious stories within his stories. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I definitely, and I'm not someone that has religious background, and but I do know a lot of those stories, and so I
Mhm.
noticed that a lot, and I thought
Mhm.
that was interesting that I noticed a lot of the
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool, and it was very interesting to see where I recognize things.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
And I think it's written well enough in a way that whether you are into any sort of religion or not, you can enjoy the writing for just surface level what it is, the lion and the kids in this
Mhm.
other dimension, and you don't have to have a background in any sort of religion to enjoy the book. Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I've felt that going into this. I think I had heard that about this. I had heard that about mouth is not working. I had heard that about these stories, but I
Mhm.
wasn't sure if I would recognize anything. And when I was reading through it, I was like, oh. And I think because I was looking for it, I was picking up more
Mhm.
so. But I also recognize that you could just enjoy this for what it is, and it does have a very moralistic perspective, and that
Mhm.
is a big focus in the story. But it also is just a fun, like it's a fun
It's just
fantasy.
a fun read.
Yeah, creative ideas, and I
Mhm.
think this is like one of the earlier Portal fantasies, if I would imagine. I
Probably.
don't know for sure, but
Mhm. I
I thought it was pretty neat that I saw so much of how other books had been influenced by this
Yeah.
story.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
pretty heavily in some cases.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because I think when we had originally started talking and hadn't officially started reading, there was a movie that came out about C.S. Lewis. And I can't even remember the title of it, but to know how much he struggled with his faith and stuff and how that kind of inspired him through his life to write the Chronicles of Narnia with things like that. And I thought that was very interesting. And now I want to go and read books by finish reading the Lord of the Rings series because Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were great friends. And so now it's like I'm looking for those connections. And it's just interesting how you can just pick up certain things where it's like this must have really influenced his life and seeing how he incorporates those in his stories and things like that.
Can you imagine Tolkien and C.S. Lewis? Like you said, they were good friends, but like those are two of some of the biggest influences in fantasy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating how that works out, huh?
Yeah. Well, and it's like now it's like wanting to read the books kind of simultaneously from both authors and seeing if you can get bits of how Lewis impacted Tolkien and vice versa. and see if you can kind of pick up on some of that. But I probably never will pick up on that personally, but it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah, for sure. I was interested in trying this out because I had recently read Neverending Story, and I've read a couple other of the older fantasies that I just wasn't as crazy about because I wasn't enjoying the older fantasies the way that I enjoy newer fantasies. And for me, it had a lot to do with the fact that older stories tend to be more adventure, based on the adventure and the actual plot, less on the characters. And I think I'm more character driven myself personally. And this one really didn't focus too much on the characters, but I think it was such a good pace that it didn't really matter for me. And the story was very interesting in its own right.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this way more than I was afraid I was not going to enjoy it as much.
And that's what I've noticed with older fantasies as well. Like you had said, it's more about the journey and the adventure. And so it's very plot heavy. And so you're getting a lot of the journeys from point A to point B and not the character development. But I think too, with the older stuff, if someone really likes to read classics and someone likes fantasy and you get those together, that could be kind of a magical experience, and enjoyable. And, it's one of those things that you have to remember too. How long ago was it written? How much older is the English? And, and things like, and thankfully C.S. Lewis isn't that old, that it's not that old English to work through. So that made it easier, more enjoyable in my opinion.
Yeah. The writing was very easy to read. And I just thought that the pacing was done just really, really well, and that maybe is the other problem I had with some of the other older fantasies that I didn't enjoy as much, as maybe the pacing just was off for me, because this was just like good clip, but then also a lot of creativity. You spend enough time on certain scenes. Like sometimes I feel like, that was my problem with Neverending Story is there was some really pivotal scenes that they would just jump like it's over. And I was like, wait a minute, we didn't actually explore that. Where I felt like even though this isn't a very long story, there was enough time spent on these really important scenes.
Yeah, and those scenes didn't drag out. It was just like kind of big, and that's one thing to remember with the Chronicles of Narnia, with it being more directed, I think, towards middle grade. It's more to the point. And so you're not getting all of this floral, additions and, tangents and stuff. It's very much, this is the way it is, and this is the consequence, and this is the reward. And I liked that. I very much enjoyed the blunt writing.
It was, yeah, and I wasn't sure what to expect from that, but it did feel like it was meant for a younger audience, and or at least it could be appreciated by a wider range of audience.
Yes,
age wise. So I did enjoy that, and it made it easier to, read quickly as I needed to.
There were a few things as I was reading I noticed, at least at the beginning of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that was a bit more on the repetitive side. And I had to, as annoyed as I got with some, it's like, okay, I get this. The same line's been used 3 different times. But where it's for middle grade, it probably is like, okay, now just remember this certain thing action is not safe type of a thing. So.
Yeah, and some of the ways they addressed each other was a little surprising to me at times. There was a little bit of, I don't want to say maybe slightly bullying in some ways, but obviously Edmund was bullying his sister. But I mean, like, just even the way they were like you're being a rat or you're being a beast. It was like, I guess they're siblings too, though. Like I have to take that into consideration. Like siblings. Are that way to each other.
Yeah, to remember that, and to remember also that it is set in an older time frame, and so things like that were more accepted, where today it's, if you see that on the street, it's gonna be some trouble.
Right. It was just kind of funny, the things that they were saying. I was like,
really,
you guys, come on now.
I know. And that's one thing I've noticed too with reading not just the Chronicles of Narnia, but with other older fantasies, is that the characters that are on the younger side, they feel a little bit more mature and older. And you think about the life that they had to go through with wars and the after effects. Well, of course, they're going to be a little bit more mature with what they go through.
Yeah. I think that really does depend on when it was written, what era they're being raised in. And that makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense, especially. And, it also makes sense coming from an adult's perspective. It's being written by an adult. But I think there's been times when adults have had less understanding of the psychology of children than they do now, say, too. So, I mean, like, there's a different perspective even in how adults react towards children or perceive children throughout time. And so I think that's interesting too, because that might change the way books are written about or for children.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that, I don't know C.S. Lewis's experience, but I bet,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be interesting to see, what his
Mm-hmm.
perspective was about children in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting too, with comparing how kids are written, how they were written and how they're written now. Now it's like sometimes you read the books that are written for middle grades and it's like they seem too childish and too young
Mm-hmm.
on some of the books, not all of them. Some authors do a really good job with hitting that age range and how kids would more realistically act. But it's just, like you said, it is interesting to see how people understand the psychology of the kids and how they would act.
I mean, and I guess it depends on, author to author too, like how much do they actually understand of children, or how do they want children to be perceived in general? It's personal choice as well as what they understand.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I think is interesting. I think it's interesting because I'm into child development, so I find it fascinating. And then also trying to think about what kind of stories young children will enjoy and what kind of stories. And I could see how, because of the pacing of this and because, like you said, how bluntly it's worded, this would be very enjoyable. And as I was reading it, I was like, oh, this would be so much fun to read to a class. Like, this would be a lot of fun and easy to read to students, and they would pretty much universally enjoy it. Not everybody, but at least because there's just something in how simplistic this fantasy is, but how enjoyable the process of reading it is, that I think would be enjoyable to a lot of people.
Yeah. And I actually thought about that pretty similarly with how, when I was reading it, I was thinking, if I ever have, because I would love to have kids of my own. And it's like, if I ever get that opportunity, this is definitely a series, at least so far with the 2 books that I've read, this is definitely a series that I can see me sitting down with my kids and having a good time reading it. And then maybe, just read it once every other year or something like that, and develop some fond memories around it. And definitely something that, as they grow up, they would still enjoy going through the years until they get bored and say they don't want to do any reading at all. But, yeah.
I can see that too.
Yeah.
Let's get caught up on some of these comments really fast. Hey, Amy. I'd read Land Witch the Wardrobe before and still found it delightfully whimsical. Yes,
Excellent.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's very whimsical.
Yes.
Naomi, hi Naomi, grew up on radio dramas, but I actually read them a few years ago and loved it even more. Oh, I didn't know there was radio dramas. I mean, it makes sense, but that's really cool. Have you heard about the radio dramas at all?
I have not. But it'll be interesting. There's definitely something that I'm going to have to look into now.
That would be fun to listen to now, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to actually write myself a note.
Yeah. Good idea. That's a good idea. Let's see. Narnia.
Drama. Yeah.
Radio dramas. I'm sure it's something we can get on YouTube.
Yeah, probably.
She also said, I think Oz might be the first portal fantasy, but it's definitely an early one. That makes sense. That actually makes sense.
I want to read that. I every time I see The Wizard of Oz, I'm like, I know there's a book and I want to read the book, and I just keep forgetting. So now I'm going to have to find a copy and get that.
Whole series. Like, that's a whole series.
Yeah.
I really liked Frank Elbaum's The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. And so that's, I do want, the Wizard of Oz is, his main set of stories, but his writing is a lot more flowery and whimsical, but it's beautiful. Like, it's just stunning. And so that would be a fun one to do. Becoming Mrs. Lewis by Patty Callahan is also, it's about how C.S. Lewis fell in love. It talked about the books coming out.
Oh.
Let me write that down.
Because
Becoming Mrs. Lewis. I'm guessing that's a book, right? Not a movie? Oh, yeah, by Patty Callahan. Obviously, it's a book.
Yeah.
Sorry. Shell said it is rather timeless.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and that's interesting. There are a few references to when it was written, and so you can pick up on some of those references, but they're so minuscule compared to, other books that you read, that it is definitely one of those things that is timeless. Yeah.
And I think the messages are timeless, and that's what works the best, because I feel like these are messages that can be applied to any situation. They're, any time period. They're just.
Well, in any age too, sometimes it's a good reminder for adults to, hey, let loose and, enjoy your inner child and enjoy something so young and whimsical,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The balance of fantasy and middle grade is perfect in my opinion. The wars weren't explicit but present, and the heavy parts were handled in a delicate way. Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Especially
Excellent
Aslan
point.
being I mean, just so everybody knows, we're spoilery here. I think everybody knows that
Yeah.
already. But like Aslan's murder is
Oh, that
very
was sad.
gruesome.
Yeah.
Gruesome. But it didn't
Mhm.
feel like you would be super traumatized by it as a child, I don't.
Mhm. I think it would be something that you would probably sit down with the child and talk about how sad it is and kind of how meaningful it can be. But I liked how it was done, like Naomi says, in a delicate way. And so it wasn't, you're not getting the gore, and so it's very age appropriate for that. And I thought that was very well done.
I
Mhm.
also liked how the expression of grief was very celebrated in this. Like
Yeah.
the children. I mean, that sounds weird because like he's celebrating grief, but it was like there was never
Mhm.
shied back from the fact that people
Right.
are going to have grief and they're going to cry or they're going to feel these things. And as a child, I think it's important to know that it's okay to feel those things and it's normal to feel
Exactly.
those things. And so I thought that was really nice that C.S. Lewis was like, "Hey, look, you're going to feel pain, you're going to feel sadness, and that's just a normal part of life, and you
Exactly.
will be okay." And I
Mhm.
kind of thought that the story did a really good job of like I said, celebrating that,
Mhm.
allowing that to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Excellent point. I thought that too. I was like very impressed with how it's like it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel all those things and but recognize it and and things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
C.S. Lewis had two stepchildren that he met when they were around 8 and 10, and then raised them after their mother died shortly after they.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I heard
Wed.
that, but very briefly. Hmm.
Wow. That's a big undertaking. Well,
Yeah.
taking over. Excuse me.
Mhm.
And you're when. So let's see. Raised them after their mother died. So they wed, and then she died
And then
pretty
he died
early. Yeah,
after.
that's pretty.
Pretty
He sent the
hard.
last book to them because he was friends with their mother long before they got married. Okay.
That's very sweet. Hmm.
They were done by Focus on the Family. Focus on. Oh, okay. So that must be the radio dramas. Thank you. Okay, let's see. This is a quote from Lewis. A children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest.
Yeah, I like that.
That's a great quote.
That is a wonderful quote. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone should you should enjoy any stories. Yeah.
Well, and it's nice to be able to relive your childhood at any point in your life, like, because we
Yeah.
need that. Well, you and I were talking right before this about stress,
Hmm.
how as we're getting older, we're finding ourselves having a harder time dealing with stress. And I
Hmm.
think, like, taking moments to just have that whimsy and that childhood joy in your life is really important. And I think that's why I like reading middle grade so much and like reading books like this.
Yeah, I think part of it is because of how things are handled. They're just, you don't not going into a lot of depth. You're already dealing with grief and big stressful situations, and then to read about big stressful situations, it's nice to take a step back and read more whimsical and lighthearted stories.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I think like that like you don't like the whole suspension of disbelief, like you doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is that you enjoy it and you
Yeah.
experience it and you let it be what it is. Like you are
Mhm.
able to enjoy the whimsy of fantasy and not have
Mhm.
to um make it real, like
Exactly.
that's. And kids get to live in that a little. I feel like, I mean, some people, adults do too, but I mean, like, kids really can just enjoy that more and don't feel like they have to
Mhm.
worry about the stressors of life as much. So they can
Mhm.
just enjoy living in that little, fantasy world where we have to kind of,
Lift our
every
head
once
and back to reality. Yeah.
it's just
Mhm.
nice to get back to that every once in a while.
Yeah.
You know what I thought was so funny? Okay. I thought it was really funny, and I made a little note because how
Mhm.
many times C.S. Lewis like badmouth schooling and schools and stuff like that, because like
Uh-huh.
which I think appeals to children because children are like, I
Mhm.
don't want to go back to school.
Yeah.
It's so funny because he's like, he had the professor saying, what do they teach in school these days? And then there were other parts where they were like, well, at least like it. And then even in Prince Caspian, like the kids are released from school. Like school is just, they
Mhm.
don't, and then they don't have to go to their boarding schools right away. And it was
Yeah.
just so funny how like there were so many instances where school was like not the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I was definitely one of those kids that loved school, and so I looked forward to, you know, school at least until high school. But so it was nice to kind of get both sides and see a little bit here and there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was the opposite. It's like I can't be bothered with school.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm
No.
going to become a teacher, so obviously school, I do find school very important. But
Mhm.
I just thought it was just hilarious. I was like,
Mhm.
C.S. Lewis really hates school. I'm like, what was his own schooling experience like that he hates school so much?
I know, and I kind of wonder if it's I mean, even like it is today. I think some of the thoughts, but the subjects are different today than they were then.
Yeah.
But like thoughts of this is inappropriate to teach in school, or this is what schools should be teaching. And I think even back then, parents struggled with that, and even today, parents struggle with that. And so it's like that's, I think, one of the things that makes things like this so timeless, and how the kids enjoyed playing, and they'll play with their brothers and sisters, and the imagination. It's like all of this stuff is so timeless. It doesn't matter how many eras pass by and things like that. It's everyone's going to have the same loves, the same, it might be slightly
Mhm.
different with the subjects, but the core loves and, you know, worries and stuff could all pretty much be flat across the board, and if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did think that was very
Mhm.
true, and I did enjoy how, you've got Edmund, he has these. Well, I mean, I guess I liked that he didn't make all the children these wonderful, perfect little children. I think that's what it
Yes.
is. Like he made Edmund this, gray character that is
Hmm.
going through some, is finding that selfishness, and that selfishness that he
Hmm.
feels at first doesn't end up helping him in the long run, but he still
Hmm.
feels it and he still explores it and he goes into that, and luckily, I mean, he gets punished in the meantime.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting having that showing, and then showing in the end how Aslan's like, well, he's not a bad guy though. Like he's a kid who was, you
Yeah.
know, he did something bad, but and
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Well, and I think it's interesting that, along with that, it's also the struggle with feeling like you had said, things like that, but then also recognizing that he's not as old as he thinks he is, and he still cares for that, and the struggle and conflicts with, okay, this is not real, but at the same time, I slightly believe it. And, you just being on the fence and trying to learn more about yourself and what you really believe and how you really feel and stuff like that. And I thought that was very realistic. It's not all just flat one feeling, one emotion.
Mhm.
I think C.S. Lewis did a great job of balancing and rounding that out with saying, you know what, you're going to have the hate your siblings at times. At the same time, you're going to love them, and that is going to conflict at times.
Yeah. Well, and then Peter even said like even when Edmund had clearly um, sold them out basically, and
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, but I kind of think it was my fault because I was giving him such a hard time. Like there was still that he still wanted to defend his brother because he still loved his brother and he still believed in his brother, even though they knew that his brother had some difficulty. And it was just so funny
Mhm.
because then Edmund comes back and they're like, and Lucy's like, well, thank goodness that he's no longer, he's changed ever since he went to that awful boarding school where they're teaching him horrible things. He's becoming. So that was another thing where I was like,
Yeah.
here's what Naomi says.
Mhm.
He hated the boarding schools and school structure. It's very obvious in the
Mhm.
silver chair. Yeah, and you could
Yeah.
tell even in this. I could
It
tell
kind
how
of
much
hints
he
towards
hated.
it. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was so funny, and
Mhm.
but yeah, I thought that was. I really liked those conversations brought into the
Mhm.
story.
Yeah.
I think you'd be devastated by the trends to get rid of recess and the arts in some school systems.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is devastating. Well, I mean, I'm guessing back then with the boarding schools, probably didn't quite have the freedom that he
Mhm.
would have wanted, anyways. So,
Mhm.
I love forgiveness that takes place when Edmund comes back, like the
Yep.
prodigal son. Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, and I I thought it was really great how he was talking to Aslan, and then he comes back and he says, "Don't talk about this anymore." Like Edmund obviously has faced his demons, and he has learned.
Mhm.
He's gotten his punishment. He doesn't need to be reminded constantly because he knows, like he knows how much he screwed up, and
Yeah.
and I think that's a hard thing for a lot of adults in general to understand when it comes to
Mhm.
children. That like you don't necessarily need to beat a dead horse. When somebody learns their lesson,
Mhm.
they understand. And a lot of times we're our own worst enemies, so we
Oh,
can
exactly.
we can beat ourselves up enough for,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Hmm.
it's just a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Smack him a couple of times.
yeah. Well, and it's like with the forgiveness too, where, Edmund comes back. It's like, they're worried and they're upset, but at the same time, they still have a deep love and concern and care for him. And so it's just, and that forgiveness is there, but that love is always, always there. And I thought that was very well done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed. Naomi says, Edmund is my favorite because of the journey all through the books. He's a brat at the beginning, but he is the first to stop the White Witch and Caspian. Yeah. Yeah, he is. And you can see his transformation quite a bit in that 1 year period from The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe and Prince Caspian. Big time. Like, you can see he's the first one who keeps trying to, in Prince Caspian, he's the one that keeps saying, like, we didn't listen to Lucy before. We need to listen to her now. And he was the only one who was really standing up for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you feel about Prince Caspian?
I really enjoyed Prince Caspian, but I think I liked The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe just a little bit better. And I think part of my struggle with Prince Caspian was I felt like it was a lot of just not a lot of journeying. There was during, a bit of it, but I think my struggle was I kind of started to get a little bit bored with them just sitting around and just kind of talking and telling stories, which is still great. And I still enjoyed it, but I wanted to see more of the progression of the story. And I think I was just kind of a little like, okay, I thought it was a little bit more slow, if that makes sense. You know?
I think I actually liked how it started out more than I got a little bogged down like halfway through, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Not horribly so. I did enjoy it. I liked elements of this one a lot. I liked how much we brought in the different characters that are from Narnia. I thought that was interesting. And there was some new fun characters we got to meet. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
I feel like we didn't get to know Prince Caspian actually as well as I maybe would have. He was kind of a secondary character.
I think that's one of the things I was kind of wanting to get to know more of Prince Caspian and his story and the buildup of his life more. But it was, a lot of kind of flipping back and forth, but mostly of the kids getting to Prince Caspian, so.
Yeah. And that journey with, what was his name? What was the name of the something's or other?
Tumnus? No, Tumnus is the
first one.
No, not Tumnus.
What is his name?
I've got my book here.
I was close. Trumpian, the dwarf. Yeah, like that whole process. I think that's where I started getting bogged down, like them getting back to Prince Caspian, and it wasn't like, but I still enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. I feel like there was a lot of creativity in this one as well. Like he does a great job with the whole bringing things through to the end. Like the whole concept of the story flows well. I feel like C.S. Lewis makes a good flowing story. But yeah, there were a couple of points in this where I got a little bogged down, I think, in the middle of it.
And I think what I really enjoyed at the beginning, and I listened to the audiobooks as well. So just as a side note, the audiobooks were really good. But at the beginning, I thought it was really interesting how was it at the beginning? I don't remember where it was, but somewhere in the book, it was mentioned that it's the next time they come back to Narnia, it will only be the younger two kids. Mm-hmm. And I thought that's an interesting thought because it's like, you see how much imagination and how these kids act out their imagination. But then once they hit a certain point, it's harder for them to do that. And even as an adult, sometimes it's hard to do that, but it's like, they're not going to have that special ability to see things how they are in that world, and they'll be too analytical, I guess, like an adult, Yeah,
and I thought that was cool how they expressed that, but also kind of sad too, because I'm like, Peter and Susan are basically getting to be too old to use they're getting to be too old to be able to imagine this world as well as and that makes me think about the professor. Obviously, the professor had to have, experienced, from the first book, he had to have experienced Narnia in some way at some point of his life. But then you get to a point where you don't anymore, and that's kind of sad. But then Peter says, like, well, don't worry. When you get to the point where you're on your last trip, you realize it's okay. Like you're done. You're
Mhm.
basically done. And I was like, that's kind of, what if they don't?
I know. Yeah. Well, and I like the conversation in the first book that they had where he's like, do you believe Lucy or do you not? It's like it's one or the other with this world. And if you believe her, then you believe this world exists. And if you don't, and it alludes to, like you had mentioned, that he had that experience in Narnia, as well. And he's been there and he may have lost a lot of the memories, but I think the feeling is still there. And that, and just carries on throughout your life.
That
And you have
just
some
made me,
triggers.
you
Yeah.
just made me think about why Aslan doesn't show himself right away. He shows himself to Lucy, but he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
show himself for any. Edmund sees him pretty quickly thereafter, but it takes longer for Peter and Susan to see him, and it's because
Yep.
Peter and Susan are the ones that hold out the longest as far as like, well, we don't believe Lucy, and
Yeah.
maybe that's what shows that they're not going to be coming back soon because they're taking so much. They're losing their faith in this fantasy world. They're
Mm-hmm.
losing their faith in you know for one, it's kind of crap that they don't believe their sister because
Yeah.
she's proven herself time and time again to be honest. But like,
Exactly.
it also kind of shows that maybe Aslan's like, yeah, this is going to be your last time coming because you guys
Mm-hmm.
took longer to see me, which means that you don't have that same level of imagination that you had before.
Well, and I think part of it too is that they tended to overthink things. And I could see that a lot. And whereas like Lucy it's like saw it just for what it is. There was no overthinking anything. It was like, this is the way it is. And we don't have to worry about going this other way or taking this path or that path. This is what Aslan said. This is the way we do it,
Right.
and there's where, the older, Susan and Peter are just like, yeah, well, what if it's this? What if it was just her imagination? What if? And it was just a lot of overthinking on their part. And I
Yeah.
think that shows as you get older, you tend to do that. You tend to overthink instead of just, which can be
in
good
that
at
world.
times. But
Trust
yeah,
in the world. Yeah.
exactly. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Amy says, I loved how time was explained in the books, that no matter how much time passes in Narnia, only seconds have passed since they went into the wardrobe.
I loved that. Mm-hmm.
And that was especially cool going from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to Prince Caspian because
Yeah.
like hundreds of years have passed.
Yeah. And it was only days, weeks, or whatever
Right.
it was. Yeah.
And it was so cool that things had changed so drastically, and it was because of other humans that had come. Like, what was it,
Mm-hmm.
pirates that had like been stranded on some island, and then they came down a cave, and they ended up in
Mm-hmm.
another part of this magical world, and then they
Mm-hmm.
came and they took over, right? Because there were no humans at that point, because the kings and the queen had 2 kings and 2 queens had left, and so it was
Mm-hmm.
just all the animals and sprites and stuff of the woods, and so gave them the opportunity to be like, hey, we're going to take over.
Yeah. And I love the fact too with the time how when it was the professor teaching Prince Caspian as he was younger, that it's like you look back on all of this stuff, and then when those kids enter back in Narnia, when Edmund, Susan, Peter, and Lucy enter back, it's fun to look back and realize how much of a difference you can make that can affect generations and years into the future with certain decisions. And and
I mean,
things
that's
like
a good
that.
lesson too, right?
Yeah, you can have a big impact on the future just with small decisions and actions.
Which is interesting considering they're just kids. Like initially, they're
Yeah.
just kids that go into this portal world.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was very fascinating how, as they stayed in Narnia longer, they recalled more of their previous experience.
Mm-hmm.
They recalled more of their abilities to live in that world really well. Like they were able to fight better. They were able to rule
Mm-hmm.
better in a sense. And I thought that was really neat that
Yeah.
being there brought back that maturity versus when they would they go back to like a minute after they went back in, or right, basically instantaneously, which is I kind of wondered how that would work at the end of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, because they're adults at that point. They've lived a whole
Yeah.
life in Narnia, and then
Mm-hmm.
they come back and they're in the wardrobe in the same
And
exact situation that they had been in before.
yep, and they're just back to being kids. Yeah,
It's gotta
that
be
was really
weird.
interesting. Yeah.
It's gonna be weird. I mean, I guess they adjusted probably
They,
what magic means them to, but it was just
mm-hmm.
It's pretty surprising.
Yeah.
The narrative is told right for me. It is so much in the past with Trumpkin's story that I wish it was told in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Trumpkin's, yeah, yeah. So I liked the story because I liked the storytelling element to it, but I also think
Mm-hmm.
that if it was told in a different way, then maybe it would have felt a little, I don't know. I don't know because I think that part I didn't mind so much.
Mm-hmm.
But you were saying that part was the
Yeah.
part that was dragging
There's
for
a little
you.
bit more, and I think it also was too, is when I was just kind of really more in a slumpy mood and harder to kind of focus too. So it'll
Hmm.
be interesting to go back and try and maybe reread it and see if I feel a little differently. But no, if it was told a little differently, I think it would have definitely affected the story in a different way. And, who knows? Maybe it would have improved it, maybe not,
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. I thought it was neat how Lewis opened the door for the other portals to Narnia. You won't reach Narnia through a wardrobe again. Yeah,
Excellent point. Yes. Mm-hmm.
that was neat too. Well, and that's how the pirates got in. It was a completely different portal. And
Mm-hmm.
oh, the horn was so cool. Like I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was so cool that the horn called. Like there was no portal that they went in at that point. When the horn called them, they
They heard
disappeared.
it. Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
is, I thought that was the coolest thing. I don't know why, but for
That was
some
cool.
reason that like totally excited me.
Well, and it was interesting because you're starting from the kid's perspective, and then it's like they're starting to feel something. Something's not quite how it was the day before. Obviously, they're on this platform to get a train to go to school and stuff, but they're starting to feel those, I guess, vibrations in the air or something, or, and the magic in the air. And then it's just all of a sudden they're in this field, this meadow, instead of on the bench and the platform. And so that was really interesting to see that and realize, that's what triggered it when they mentioned the horn and him
Mhm.
blowing the horn.
Yeah,
It's like help will come when you blow this horn, and
I thought that was
there you
cool.
go.
I
Mm-hmm.
really liked seeing that because we didn't see it as much in the. I mean, I know that she did blow the horn once and they came running, but you
Mm-hmm.
could hear the horn at that point. So it didn't seem like, or maybe they couldn't have, but it seemed like they could hear. No, they did in the first book. They heard the horn, but it was neat to
Mm-hmm.
see how the horn would work no matter where you were in, like
Yeah.
whatever dimension you were in. And I
Mm-hmm.
and Amy said, no, Naomi said, I love that too. You won't find it the same way as before. So the different portals.
Mm-hmm.
It was neat that it's not no longer the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's no longer the wardrobe. It's something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so Naomi's clarifying. The narrative isn't told in the right way for me. I don't like that we learn about Caspian through Trumpkin instead of active events.
That's an excellent way to put it. Yeah.
I could see
Mm-hmm.
that. I could
Yeah.
see that.
Mm-hmm.
Or faith. Yeah, I agree with you, Shal. Like, or faith. And that's probably true in a lot of cases because
Mm-hmm.
um, getting older, you're, experiencing different things. And I think we're talking about like why they don't stay as long when they're young.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's what she's talking about. But
Yeah.
yeah, that does change.
Well, yeah, because as you get older, you start to question certain things. Was what you were taught right, and is it what you truly believe, or is there different experiences that's going to change your opinion, and you're going to believe
Right.
something completely different?
Especially once you start hitting the puberty age, which I think is like where
Mm-hmm.
Peter and Susan were. They're at that age
Yeah.
where you start really questioning things because your body's changing, your experiences are changing, you're developing in so many
Mm-hmm.
ways and you start rebelling against things. So it's like I could see that being a time when it's like, well, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to bring a clear mind to this. You're going to
Yeah.
be, yeah, and not be able to make decisions based off just your faith or your belief in what you're doing, the fantasy, knowing that you're there because, and just enjoying the whole process of being there, as opposed to, like you said, overthinking and
Mm-hmm.
taking, and that wouldn't help them in the long run if they're there to
Mm-hmm.
save Narnia and they went the wrong way because they just wouldn't listen to Lucy, they wouldn't believe Lucy, they wouldn't trust in
Mm-hmm.
what Lucy was saying, and that could
Mm-hmm.
have got them killed. Like they
Yeah.
almost got killed by the arrows that were shot at them. So it's like they're obviously not
Mm-hmm.
doing what they need to do in Narnia to at their age. They're kind of losing
Well,
their faith.
and part of it too could be how much of the peer pressure that they've experienced with kids their own age affects their thinking, and kind of like, well, if this was in this world, or if someone else was here, how would that affect things? And peer pressure can be very you know damaging, and you've heard that, you hear that all the time in news and stuff. And so it's like, how much of that, because we're missing a big part of their life from when they fell out of the wardrobe and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to all of a sudden back to school. We're missing a chunk, and it's like how of their time, and it's like, did they make new friends in their area? And what else is influenced? What else has gone on in the world that has influenced how they think about things?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to have that a different book kind of explain what happened, and that'd be interesting.
In between, yeah, absolutely. Wow. Because, yeah, they do change. I mean, children change as they get older. They turn into adults. They experience different things. They're, like you said, peer pressure. Their range of who they meet and who they're around broadens. Like, they get to know more people, and different things affect them. And then they're going to stop believing. They're going to be like, oh, I don't remember that quite the way I remembered it before.
Well, it's just like with Santa Claus,
Yeah.
and the magic that goes with all of that. And interesting to see how kids question it because their friends are questioning it, and others that it's just like, I don't care. I love how I feel with it, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I knew very early on, pretty early on. I just knew that Santa Claus wasn't real, but I didn't care. I was like that. I was like, I don't care. I still want to believe, or at least I enjoy the Santa Claus. Like, I enjoyed that part of the year. I enjoyed that tradition. I enjoyed those thoughts. So, like, I just was like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to still enjoy that process because I thought, but I know some people, I have some friends who were like really traumatized by it, and they just hate the concept of Santa Claus because they were so traumatized by when they found out their parents had lied to them the whole time.
Like, oh, no. Well, see, and I grew up as an only child, and so I remember my questioning came from my peers, my own age, and them saying, Santa's not real, and finally me going, Mom, okay, tell me the truth. What's the deal? And part of me, and I was torn. I remember growing up, and I can see this with like Susan and any of the kids as they get older. It's like you want to believe in that magic, and you want to have that enjoyment and just that pure joy. But at the same time, it's kind of like with the peer pressure, you're kind of ashamed of it, ashamed to say that you still want to believe in it and have that happiness and that magic in your life.
That certainly is that's like a very accurate, like the way kids feel pressured by other students to not, things they would otherwise be like, yeah, that's okay. I can still believe in these things. But can I though? Or at least I got to pretend that I don't, because I don't want to get made fun of by my friends. I don't want to seem childish. I don't want to seem, that's a good point. I think that's interesting because I do feel like that is kind of the transition that Peter and Susan are starting to make.
Yes.
Which is so funny though, because they are adults. Like in the end of Child Witch, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like they live their lives as adults in this magical world.
And it's interesting because that makes me think it's like you can really see the impact of like their choice to stay, and they grew up in Narnia, and then once they make that decision and go and they're back in the real world, and of how much the choices that you make will affect, a week down the road, and change how you think about things. I feel like I'm kind of muddled and all over with that, but I hope that makes sense. But your life can have completely different paths, like with the choice, like with you, with going to school, the choice to go to school versus not go to school, take this job or that job.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, if I could do it all over again. No, I'm just kidding. No, that makes sense to me. I mean, and I think it is an interesting way for C.S. Lewis to look at growing up, like, and bring that into the story and show the whimsy of childhood, but then show how that our lives become something that we have to move into. And I think that was I think that's a conversation that he's kind of having in these stories, and maybe making it okay to grow up, because Peter does accept it. He says to Lucy, he's like, when it happens to you, it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to see the last time you come here, it'll be fine. Whereas Lucy's like, oh, I can't imagine, that would be horrible. And so, I mean, gracefully aging into it, which I think is hard to do. Let's see. Hey, Mac, just got home, so I'm just joining. Overall, I really enjoyed both books. Yeah, we were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. We were talking about how much. I mean, I really enjoyed both books too. I would like to read the second one. I think you said you'd like to reread the second one also,
Mm-hmm.
because I had to rush through that one.
Yeah.
I feel like I got what I needed to get out of it, but I would like to take my time, and that was a me
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
Shell says, "Sorry, I was supplementing faith for imagination as to what you lose as you get older. That affected Peter and Susan's ability to see Aslan and trust Lucy." Yeah.
Well, and it's either way. It's, some people, whether it is faith or some people who don't have, certain faith may say it is just the imagination. So either way, it's either that or, the imagination and stuff. It's like with Santa Claus, having faith in Christmas, faith in Santa, or is it just the imagination and things like that. So either way it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, and that's true too about the faith concept as well, and the questioning of, like we're talking about, how questioning faith as you get older. Anyways, it's like the concept of, and that goes along with this being a story that is really, it was really based in a lot of C.S. Lewis's faith. So I think that that conversation is an interesting one to have, because he's basing so much of his story off of stories that have been around, like stories that have been told for hundreds and hundreds and of years. So like I think that is an interesting conversation to have, that he's trying to have. Like he's trying to say, like, as you get older, these are things that might come up and you might be thinking about. Like, and not to say that there's an age that you stop having faith, but I don't know. I just kind of think that it's interesting that he's having that conversation with us as an author.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm also muddling. Susan is too practical for the imagination and possibility of Narnia. She has to logic it. I know, and she did that from the very beginning. She was also a lot more fearful, and she was a lot more willing to turn back all the time.
Yeah.
Like she was the one that always kept saying, like, maybe we should go back, or maybe we should stop, or maybe this is too dangerous.
Yeah, she did a lot of questioning. Is like, is this really the right choice to make? Are there other options? Different paths to take, or whatever the case is. Yeah, she had a lot of questions and just thought a lot. And that just shows as you get older, you tend to, like we had said way earlier, kind of overthink things. And
And I think that's why she was the last one to see Aslan. It was interesting because I thought that was a little strange how she was saying, like, oh, deep down, Lucy, I did believe you. When, like, she does say that after she sees Aslan, she's like, well, but really, deep down, Lucy, I did believe you. And it rang kind of funny to me. I'm trying to remember where exactly that was. But the things that Susan said after that just were kind of like, I don't know about
you really? It's like the doubt was always there.
It just seems like she's trying to save face there. It doesn't seem like she's actually genuine about what she's saying at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably one part where I was like, that was a little odd.
Yeah.
It was a little off for me, and maybe that's because, like Naomi said, she's too practical for the imagination of it all. But I just thought it was strange that she seemed like she was lying at that moment. Like it seemed like she was just trying to make everybody not think poorly of her.
Yeah, but that comes back to also, real life. That's what we do in life too. People, you have someone that's saying that, and then you have something, and then, their friend, brother, sister, whatever, doubts it. And then they're like, oh, but I believed you the whole time. Even though I showed doubt and questioned everything, I still believed you the whole time, when they really, didn't. And so I think C.S. Lewis did a great job of putting real life thinking, the ways of thinking and stuff into the books.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no, definitely. She gets the point of belief after a very extended time. Yeah, very extended time where she's present in the moment.
Yeah.
It took her the longest, for sure.
Yeah.
And she really was hesitant. So I could see for sure that she would be one who wouldn't come back. Peter didn't seem quite as, I know he's maturing and he's getting older. He's the oldest. But he didn't seem as disbelieving as Susan did.
Well, and I think that also shows, too, one of the things that he was trying to convey is that it doesn't matter your age. Sometimes you're younger and you are more critical and analytical in your thinking. And, and then you can have someone that's several years older and has more life experience, but even though they have the same analytical thinking aspects, they're still a little bit more quick to believe in the whimsy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
personal experience. It doesn't matter your age. It's a lot of personal experience throughout life.
Yeah. See, I understand what she said in a way. I think you can have a gut feeling, but not trust as you question and process.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah,
And I certainly have done that in general, like in, you especially when it seems unrealistic. And like you said, she's very like Naomi said, she's very practical. She's very logical. So what Lucy is saying does not make sense.
Right.
It makes sense in Narnia, but it doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things.
Yes. Yeah. And so you definitely can doubt. It's like, okay, well, I had this gut, but it just doesn't seem practical type of thing. And so you tend to overthink it and you just doubt and question. And that's, I think, where a lot of questioning comes from. Just that little seeded doubt.
Yeah, and I guess it's easier for me to say, like, well, Susan, what's your deal? When I'm actually watching the whole story unfold. And, like, I know Aslan's there, and I know. So, like, yeah, if I was in the same situation, though, I don't know how I would react in that situation because, as Shell can attest to, I don't believe in ghosts. So she's always trying to. Well, I if I see it, I will believe it. But so I really liked how quickly Edmund listened and believed Lucy. Showed some interesting growth compared to book one. Yeah, yes. We did also like that as well, Mac. We thought that was a really cool element of this book. And Edmund, like, because man, he was a nasty little boy in the first book.
I did. It's like if I could reach through and just bop him upside the head, I just wanted to do that. But in this book, it's like he's much more, you can see how the events of the first book affected him and how he is much more quick to believe his sister and what she says and trust her.
Which shows that he really learned his lesson in that first book. He really learned his lesson because all he wanted was Turkish delight. And granted, the Turkish delight was magical. He was thinking horrible thoughts about his siblings, And I mean, I'm like you. I was raised an only child. I have a brother, but he's 12 years younger than me. So he's basically just this adorable dude. That he's super sweet. His personality is basically like mine, but male. And I enjoy him, but I wasn't raised with him like a sibling where I would have that same level of animosity towards him or feel those feelings of I just can't stand you, So there's times when I'm just like, geez, Edmund, you're a jerk. So I always assumed it was because girls mature faster than boys. Susan seemed more mature from the beginning.
That's a good point. And that's been, I've heard a lot about that, how, girls do tend to mature just a little bit faster mentally and stuff. And I thought that was very interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But I thought her levels of fear, at least in the first book, were very, so she was more mature in some ways, but her levels of fear and how much her fear drove her decisions was a little immature because so I feel like there's yes and no, yes, she definitely was a lot more mature in the way she thought and how logical she was. But at the same time, she was she was the first one to be fearful about everything. And maybe that's because she understands the dangers of the world, but also overcoming fears is a big part of growing up as well, too. So I don't know. Yeah, she does seem like the character that has I don't want to say the most flawed of the characters, but she shows her, well, no, Edmund obviously is, but I mean, she shows her things that scare her, you see those things in her more than you do the other kids sometimes.
Kind of more, the expression, you wear your heart on the sleeve. It's more like she wears her fear and on the sleeve.
Uncertainty rather. Yeah. She's meaning her disbelief about ghosts. Well, Shell and I will go to haunted places together. We like to go to haunted places together because she's a really strong believer and I'm very much like, there's no such thing as ghosts. So then we like to go and check out these haunted places to see if we can find ghosts. So that's what she means, because then I just tease her. Ed has complete faith in Lucy and is willing to back her up at every turn in Caspian. That's why I love him. Yeah, I agree. I really liked that. I really liked that change in his character from the first book to the second book. I just thought that was, and shows his growth and his maturity as a person. Turkish Delight does not look delightful.
Oh,
I love Turkish Delight, but
no, I've never had it. This Narnia is the first time I've ever heard of Turkish Delight, to be honest. So
it's, you can get Turkish Delight like at the stores, and it's like it's cheap. It's not as good, but if you get like real Turkish Delight from like homemade Turkish Delight or from Turkey or like real, it's good. It's really good. I like it, but it's, it depends on where you get it.
Yeah.
But it's like a delicacy sweet. It has like nuts and stuff in it, or doesn't have to have nuts. But I had 2 siblings by the time I was 2.5. Fully understood the dynamic. I have another sibling who's 6 years younger as well. Yeah. So yeah, and I was lucky with my brother that he was so much younger than me.
Yeah. Well, and I grew up with my mom because my parents divorced when I was 9. And so with my mom, I'm an only child. But the few times I was with my dad, I had my step and my half siblings. So it's like I just like barely skimmed the surface of that sibling contention, just barely. But I didn't grow up with them enough and wasn't around them enough to fully understand what it's like to have a sibling.
Yeah, and I think it is probably different when you're like raised, you guys are raised together the whole time versus like my brother came when I was 12 and I lived with him off and on because I lived with my mom most of the time, or I lived, so my relationship with him was more like a cousin in a lot of ways than it was an actual sibling. Yeah. Amy's never had Turkish Delight. It's good stuff. I love it. I don't know, the 1988 movie always made me crave Turkish Delight. Leanna, you would enjoy it. You would love it. Everybody gets the Turkish Delight, so they don't get the stuff in the store. It's not good. That doesn't help, does it?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah. Let's see. Turkish Delight will always be infamous in my mind because of the series. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense because it is like the evil food in this, which is interesting. Like, why is Turkish Delight the evil food? But it's and the whole time he's eating it, I'm like, oh, you're gonna get sick, dude.
I know. Like, well, and it's like if we were in his position, what would be our version of the Turkish Delight? Yeah, pizza, chips, French fries, salty stuff.
Oh, you're a salty eater.
Oh yeah, I love the salt.
I'm like, cookies are trouble for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's definitely our own individual, like what we love so much that we have a hard time, and it also shows like that concept of when you overdo something, it can really get you in a lot of trouble, and him losing the control over, because he lost all control, like he didn't care about anything anymore. All he cared about was this need to have this Turkish Delight.
It's interesting. I've been rewatching the CSI Las Vegas, and there's this one episode where I don't know how much money it was, but it was stolen from one of the casinos, and it made this one police officer who was a good cop turn bad because he basically sold his good life and career for this money. And so it's kind of like with it, in the story, he made the bad decisions for the Turkish Delight. And it's like, kind of, when I saw that, it made me reflect on the book with the Turkish Delight. And it's like, he kind of basically sold his soul for the Turkish Delight for, that stuff.
Yeah. And I agree with you that can be said for a lot of things, like you said, money. And that's true for basically anything that people overdo, anything that people will give up everything else for. I mean, I guess it's kind of like, I don't want to say necessarily addiction, because it doesn't feel like that. More so it feels like this level of greed and selfishness that is taking over this child, that he's just like, I care about this more than I care about anything. I mean, he basically said, I'm gonna give my siblings to this witch lady.
Yeah, it's like, we'll trade. I'll give you my siblings for a bit of Turkish Delight. It's like kind of sells them out.
It was magical Turkish Delight.
Yes.
The best stuff ever. Yeah. Let's see. Leanna's determined to make a vegan version. And I remember we talked about Turkish Delight before in another live show, or maybe Sprints it was, Leanna. Yeah, maybe for the holidays. I think if you get a good recipe, Leanna, send it to me, because I'd be curious to try that. Let's see. The 2005 movie of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is great, but Caspian was not done well as an adaptation. Oh.
I did see the 2005 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and absolutely loved it, but I didn't ever see any. I know they made a couple of movies after, like the Prince Caspian, and I haven't seen that one yet. But yeah, I remember just absolutely loving, and it was kind of like the same feelings of loving the magic and the whimsy was brought back with reading the book.
Yeah, that's nice when an adaptation can help you enjoy the book, like especially if you've watched the movie first and then you read the book. Sometimes
helps you visualize a couple of things a little bit better sometimes.
Yeah. And so, but it's sad to know that the Caspian one wasn't done well. There's a lot of versions, aren't there? A lot of adaptations of this series in general.
I don't know. I'd have to look into that. I didn't even know there was one before of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe before the one in 2005. I thought that was the first one, but I would love to go back and watch the older version and see if it's just as true to the book as the one from 2005.
Yeah, I need to. I haven't seen any of them, so I'm obviously missing out. Let's see. The school where I was student teaching was showing the movie in class, and that was the first time that I read the first book. Oh, so okay, so that makes sense because you were like, "Oh, I want to read the book." Yeah, it makes me want to watch the movies now because like you said, it helps you visualize some of the things as well. I enjoyed that, especially when it comes to fantasies like this, middle grade fantasies.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Nana. See, they made the Dawn Treader as well, didn't they?
I think they did. I think they made like at least 3, maybe 4. But definitely, I do know that they did the Prince Caspian, and I think they did another one. I just don't know if it was the Dawn Treader or a different one.
Oh yeah, let's see. Leanna said yes. Watch the 1988 one.
That's okay.
Of the Dawn Treader. 1988.
Let's see. I'm gonna look up on my phone. Let's see. Lion. Why is my thing not charging?
Jill said I adored the movies and the old English ones when I was younger. Ooh, old English ones.
Ooh, I didn't know.
I think I would love that.
Yeah.
Movies, that means there's more than one? Like all the series?
Oh, I do see. Okay, so I'm pulling it up, and I do see that it looks like there's one that's kind of like a cartoon one. So but I don't know what year that
the 88 one is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Not Dawn Treader. Okay. I'm writing that down. See, Naomi says Voyage was good as an adaptation, but only good as a movie. It is more episodic in style. Okay. Okay. So
I would imagine that the movie of like Prince Caspian might, even though it might not have been done well, you would get more of the action in it than in the book. It'd be easier to make it more.
I feel like the story element of how the story is narrated in the book could actually work better as a movie because you could do flashbacks and stuff like that. Or you could do a sequence where you're flashing back while he's telling the story, go into this, this dream sort of sequence where the story is unfolding. And I think that would actually work better as a movie than a book, which is kind of sad that it didn't because with the right director, I think it.
Well, now I know that I do want to see the movie now, but at least now I know not to have my expectations so high.
So maybe you'll really enjoy it because you'll be like, oh, it's going to be crap.
Yeah, and then it'll be a little bit better than I think it is and go, you know what, that wasn't so bad as I thought.
That's always, I think that's the way you should go into anything in life.
Yeah.
It's probably crap.
Yeah. I remember have you ever read, completely different book now, have you ever read Sleepy Hollow?
No, I want to. It's nice and short, though, but I've heard
it's very short. And I remember reading it, and I had seen the movie years before, the one with Johnny Depp, and absolutely loved the movie. And then I read the book, and I felt so disappointed because it was so short. And it's like I felt like the movie was done in such a better way because it could expand certain scenes, and you could visualize things a little bit better. It's just one of those things where certain stories are better in a movie, in my opinion. But so I don't know. I'm going to have to watch Prince Caspian and see.
I have definitely heard that about, and I felt that way about certain movie adaptations where I'm like, oh, I didn't like the book, but I really like the movie. Well, Never Ending Story. There's my example
Yep.
right there. I love the movies. Did not love the book. Didn't hate it, but I just, could have done without it.
Yeah.
And there's a couple others like that where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is such a great, great movie. And you read the
Mm-hmm.
book and you're like,
Oh, it's like my experience was exactly the same with the book Bridge to Terabithia. Didn't like the book, loved the movie because I felt like the whimsy and the world of them entering in their world and that world in the book and showing their imagination was so much better than it was written down on page.
I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
I've recently heard that Princess Bride, the book, is just as good as the movie. So maybe I need to.
I've read it. I
You
actually
think so?
read it recently. It's very different, I would say.
Oh, really?
You'd have to go in and think that the book is its own complete version, and the movie is kind of like a retelling in a way.
Okay. But
It would be
equally
my opinion.
enjoyable, or were you still having the same expectations for?
I think like there's certain things that were in the movie that weren't in the book that I enjoyed more. Like in The Princess Bride, I love the part where they're on the sea, they have the princess, and they start going, doing that, Inigo and Fezzik doing that rhyming, or the rocks ahead if they're all be dead. And that's not in the book. And so I really missed that. But in the book, you get more of the backstory of how things kind of developed and stuff like that. And so that was, yeah. And the fire scene is better in the movie than the book, too, in my opinion.
Okay. Naomi says that Netflix picked the whole series, but haven't heard anything in a while. So maybe Netflix has it or will have it soon. Leanna says, not animated. There are animated ones, but the 1988 one is live action. I don't know if I'd want to see an animated one. I want a live action one.
Yeah.
Caspian made me mad. Oh, really? They made Caspian a 20-inch prince who is in love with Susan. Oh. Yeah, Caspian's a little boy.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's a little creepy and kind of icky because it's weird. Like, reading the book, Susan's like, what, around 8 or something like that in the book? I can't remember how old.
Puberty, so she's probably around because, like, I think they're.
Oh, Susan. No, I'm thinking Lucy. So Susan, yeah,
Susan's got to be like 12, 13, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and Caspian's a little boy. Like he's written as a little boy in the book. So
exactly.
That's strange. That's a choice. That's a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a 1988 Prince Caspian and a 1990 The Silver Chair. I haven't seen those yet. Okay. So I've got to check out some of those.
A couple of different adaptations, so it'll be good to see.
I think the Princess Bride movie screenplay was written by the same person, and that helps.
That makes sense.
That helps. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does help. If the person is able to write the screenplay as well, then I think that sometimes the ties are better. At least they know how to put what's important in the movie, the things that really need to be carried over from the book.
Well, and what's not going to be, is not going to adapt well into movie format, because in the book there's a lot more history, there's a lot more seeking out certain documents and things like that, which was very interesting and enjoyable to read about, but it wouldn't translate well into a movie.
Oh, here, this Amy says, the rhyming was added to the movie because Andre the Giant loved playing that rhyming game on set.
I have heard that.
Funny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's funny. That's really cool, though. That's neat. And I like that they took that and, went with it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, too, because in the book, there's also a little bit there, at least in the edition that I have, they have a little bit of information about certain things with the characters and how their relationship could translate onto film. And it's one of the things was that Andre the Giant was shy around all these other people that he hasn't met. And then it was Mandy Patinkin, I think is the name that played Inigo Montoya. And it says in one time Mandy Patinkin just turned around and slapped Andre the Giant and said something. And then their bond was so good and they conveyed it in the movie. It's like that got Andre to get over that. So,
oh dear.
Yeah. It was just really, yeah. Mandy Patinkin.
Amy says, however, a lot of the great things with the movie Princess Bride is the ad-libbed lines, which wouldn't be in the book. Yeah. And there were a lot of comedians in that one, so it makes sense that they would have a lot more of the ad-libbed lines.
Yeah, a lot improv and creative licensing and all of that. Mm-hmm.
Naomi says, "Thank you. It was so wrong for the relationship talking about
Yeah,
Caspian and
Susan and
Susan."
Caspian.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense for the age of the characters and the
Mhm.
voice of the characters in the book. So just
Mhm.
like, not every movie has to be this epic romance. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, Naomi says we should do a watch along at the end of the whole series. That would be
Well, that would be
fun.
fun. That would be
That
really
would be
fun.
fun. I don't know how
Mhm.
to do that, but I got to figure out. I know other people do that, so I should figure out how to do it anyways. So I know there's
Yeah.
programs you can actually do where they have
Mhm.
like watch along features and stuff. So I'm gonna look into that, and that's a good idea, Naomi. Let me write
Yeah.
that down so I don't forget.
Yeah. And for anyone, this is just a little thing for anyone who's interested in like reading the book. If you like listening, so far, I would definitely recommend the audiobooks as well. Each book, I got the whole series on Audible, and each individual book in the series is narrated by someone completely different, which on some level bothers me, but we'll see how it progresses as the series goes. But Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was narrated by Michael York, and he did a fabulous job with, changing his voice and the accent and everything. And the second one was done by Lynn Redgrave, I have written down. And it took me a little bit more to get used to her voice and her trying to adapt to, Edmund's voice versus Susan's voice and all of that. But so I think that's part of why I like the first one a little bit more. I think the narration was done better. But
I
I mean, they
wish
were
they had
both
stayed
really
with
good.
him.
What was that?
Sorry, I said I kind of wish they had stayed with Michael York the
Mm-hmm.
first. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're good. No, I do wish they would have stayed with Michael York because he did a really good job. But one of the authors, the name that I recognized was, and I'm drawing a blank, and I always do this. Patrick Stewart, the guy that
Mhm.
played Picard in Star Trek. I am excited to hear how he translates it in his version. So we'll see
What,
how
where,
that one goes.
where's his version? Is that the next book?
No, I don't remember where it is, but I think it's quite a bit later. But I
Oh,
can't.
okay.
Let me
So he
see.
does.
Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the second because I was listening to the audiobook also,
Mhm.
especially on the second book, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't bad or anything, but I really liked the first Michael York. I really liked
Mhm.
his narration, so I was like, let's just stick with that because it was so good.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I've got him pulled up. Let's see. Narnia. Let's see. Patrick Stewart, narrator, Narnia. I'm going to. It's probably going to take me over to Audible. Yeah, I
And
don't
Billy,
know. It puts him towards the end of the list, so he's probably more like somewhere between the 5 and 7 range.
okay, so but that's strange that they use different narrators. I mean, I know that that's done, but especially for like
A
I don't know, it
longer
would be nice
series.
to have the consistency for this longer
Mhm.
series.
It was kind of
Uh,
similar with what's that series? The series of unfortunate events. It's had started out with like Tim Curry, and then I think because of the stroke that he had or something, it went to the author to narrate, and then switched back to Tim Curry for the rest of the books
okay,
after one or two of them. And so that's kind of jarring to get different narrators for different books, but you know,
I agree.
it happens.
Yeah. Amy says, and Billy Crystal ad-libbed a lot of his lines. Yeah, that's what I figured
Yeah.
because you have the comedian in there. You know, the
Mhm.
comedians in there. They're going to do a lot of their own things.
Yeah. Do their own
Carrie
versions and
Elwes'
things.
memoir is delightful. I highly recommend listening to it.
Oh, okay.
It's it
Carrie
narrated by, how do you say that name? Carrie
Ellis
Elwes.
Eulis. I don't know. If I listen to the book, I'll know how to say it.
No one passed that on to movie producers that not every movie needs to be a massive love story. Yeah, obviously they didn't. Because, I mean, I like love stories too, but that doesn't mean they all have to be love stories. There's plenty of stories that don't include a romance
Yes.
in the world. There's plenty of stories that are out there in the world that
Mhm.
are more than just a romance.
Yes.
Amy listened to one Hoopla, and I believe the same narrator used in both
Oh,
books.
good to know. Mhm.
Never mind, I just looked.
Mhm.
The war scenes were fantastic, but I couldn't get over the choices made.
Mhm. Like the war scenes in Prince Caspian, or
Oh, that must be it. Yes, yes.
yes,
I'm
yeah.
talking about Prince Caspian.
Mhm.
So the war scenes were, and you were saying that would be a good part of Prince Caspian the movie because you'd actually get to see
Mhm.
the war scenes, and you'd get
Yeah.
to see the battles and stuff like that. But yeah, the choices about
Yeah.
Caspian and Susan.
Yeah, not so much.
That makes Nick decided he wanted to try and be an audiobook narrator and then realized he hated it.
See, and that would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense too. So yeah. Yeah, I know that someone else mentioned that it was because Tim Curry had that stroke. And so, but I could see it going both ways, and, both at the same time. It's like, hey, you may as well try it. Yeah.
Tim Curry was the narrator of the Christmas Carol version that I listened to, and it was so good. He's just so good.
Mm.
It's just Tim Curry. I just looked and the narrators were different. Okay, so the narrators are different for the Hoopla version.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought the audiobooks were really good too, though. The audiobooks sometimes work really well and sometimes they don't. But I feel like for these middle grade fantasies, typically audiobooks work pretty well for these.
Yeah.
Oftentimes sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, that's what I find with pretty much a lot of fantasies, is, at least for me, because there's a lot of, different words and just kind of trying to figure out the world and stuff, that audiobooks work really well with fantasies. And I think it would be the same thing with like with sci-fi or science fiction, that audiobook would be a really good way to go with sci-fi.
Yeah, and I also think it's true for a lot of like the classic fantasy, well, classics in general, but like classic fantasies, because more people want to voice those that have more, like you get some more of the experienced narrators, because it's like Tim Curry, or other people who are famous people that want to narrate these really well-known classics. They want to be known for, like, and it's not to say that other narrators aren't great, but they're actors. Like, they know how to, I've listened to a couple of classics that were narrated by famous actors, and they're just so good because they're just such good actors. So they're really good at handling the story really well. And so I think you get some really good narrators with these classic fantasies.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with narrators on the classics that I find is, with the older English, it definitely helps to get through that. Because it's definitely, I tried to read War and Peace. And there's so many different variations of narration of the War and Peace, but there are certain classics that I picked up the audiobook for, and it just made it go a little bit more smoothly. I didn't feel so jarred with going from sentence to sentence. And so that's another great way to get through classics, is definitely, I recommend the audiobooks on those.
Yeah. I think it just depends on the book, Yeah. I tried to listen to Little Dorrit recently, and that's a book I need to read physically. Yeah. Like, sometimes it works, and there's definitely some classics that I'm like, oh yes, this helps a lot because you get that voice. But then sometimes I just can't focus.
Yeah, and there are some people, it's like, I tried listening. I remember I read Twilight physically, and then I tried while I was at work to listen to it, and I didn't care for the narrator. I felt like they tried to do the voices, but they were so new to it, they couldn't do the voices yet. And it's just like, listening to it was more irritating than not with the Twilight series. But then you get something like, there's this one he wrote, Devil in the White City, or even like the narrator for Harry Potter does such a good job. And I know he does other work, and I really need to look into his other works, because his voice is like awesome. It's such a beautiful voice.
Yeah, and I have preferences too when it comes to that in general. There's been some books where I start listening to them and I know I'm going to like the book. Like, if I were to actually sit down and read it, I know that I would like it, but I'm not enjoying the audiobook, or I can't keep focus because the author's just not keeping my attention, that I'm just like, nope. And with audiobooks, I'm much more quick to just say, nope. I don't want to say like softy enough. Like, I'm just not going to try this, because I'm not huge on audiobooks for myself anyways, because I'm not very, audio, is it the word audio? Like, I'm not as audio as I am, reading.
Yeah, no. Cool. Yeah. See, and I love listening to the audiobook while reading along. For me, that helps me connect certain things, and especially words I don't recognize and stuff like that. And where I can get so confused with just reading, that it helps me stay a little bit more focused with listening along while I read. And there are some narrators that I found that it's like, one day I can listen just fine, and the next day their voice is way too low and it irritates my ears, and it's like, or it's way too high pitched, and I feel like they're digging an ice pick in my ear or something. Cause it's just day to day, and There are some narrators you just can't take the pitch of their voice or how they interpret characters.
Audiobooks are tricky, but they can be great. They can be really wonderful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, Caspian is a great movie if you haven't read it. Don't care about the books. Jill says, haha, sorry, I love Caspian even though I love the books as well. It was just a pet peeve of mine, but glad you still loved it. You know, and I can see, like, if you're able to separate, and that's kind of like what we were talking about before with, like, the Princess Bride and the book. If you're really able to separate the two for what they're worth, you know, this is its own. And there was a book or a movie or something I read recently where it was quite a bit different than the book, or I just, and in that particular case, I didn't mind it at all because I really liked the movie for what it was, and I really liked the book for what it was. So I was able to just appreciate them for their separateness and not feel. And that doesn't always work, though. There's definitely times when I'm like, when you get irritated because you're like, no, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's just like with the, you know, everyone liking, a lot of people liking retellings of like Cinderella, and you have all of these retellings, and some people are like, well, this retelling is really good, but this one is garbage. You know, it's part of it's just personal preference. And I mean, it's like with The Princess Bride. I just kind of have to look at it as the movie is a retelling of the classic of The Princess Bride. And same thing with the movies of Rebecca. There's a couple of different versions of Rebecca. And, you know, I mean, that one's a little closer to the book, but it's still, you know, they have their own creative license and all of that.
Yeah, I had that problem with the first Hunger Games movie. I really had a hard time enjoying the first Hunger Games movie. Now, I know a lot of people loved it, and for its own work, it's considered really good. But in that case, for some reason, I had a hard time enjoying it. The second movie I really enjoyed, and I felt like it went well for me with as the other book. But like, then there's other cases where it doesn't bother me so much. I just think it depends on how the director does it. Depends on how I feel about the book, maybe. I don't know. But
well, and who they casted as the character, like how you pictured and stuff. Right. You know, I know that it's like what series is it? Divergent. Series. I never knew it was a book until the day I went to go see the movie, and my mom mentioned, oh, that's based on the book. Loved the movie, and then went and bought the whole book series that was out. But then I can see how people loved the book, but then hated the adaptation in the movies.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah.
It's as the movie goes along, it gets more and more different from the book.
Yeah, and I rarely want to watch the movie before I read the book, you know, because I guess for me, it's like if I watch the movie, and I had an argument with somebody about this recently, a friendly argument, but like an argument about this. He is someone who doesn't read. He reads, but he's not a reader. And he's like, no, you watch the movie first, so you have a picture of who these people are in your heads. And I'm like, but then when I read the book, I only think of that person. I don't think of how I've created the character in my head, you know, like, or what I imagined the character to be like. But then somebody else explained to me was like, but some people have a harder time imagining what the character would be just by reading the book. And like, I do get that. So I could see how it would be. But so for myself, I would prefer not to initially have that actor in my head when I'm getting to know a character. Yeah. But that being said, like that new Where the Crawdads Sing, I've never read the book. Actually, I haven't really had any interest to read the book, but the movie looks really good. So I'm like,
you know, I saw the preview for that, and I thought, oh, that looks so good. Now I kind of want to read the book.
I know. Yeah. Maybe I don't really want to read the book. Maybe I just want to go see the movie. Yeah. Let's see. I get it. We all have them. Didn't mind aging up the characters in order to keep the same actors. I love that casting so much. That's why I happen to keep them. Yeah. And that happens too. That's the problem is if your characters are aging, what do you do with them?
Exactly. That's the problem with casting children is, you know, they grow up and, you know, and that if they don't develop a certain way, it's, you know, and that they have pictured, they change them. And
I mean, I think that's why the Harry Potter casting worked so well was because they really they followed the aging of the kids, and you can see the development of them through those years, and it worked really well, you know. But if they had missed a couple of years, or if they had, you know, like it would have screwed up things quite a bit as far as how they look.
Yeah.
I don't mind little details or scenes being changed if the heart of the story is the same.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because it's like you want the same plot and the same development throughout the movie that you get throughout the book, but if they change major points, it alters the course of the plot a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I do like that. It's like, yeah, go ahead and change these couple little things. Instead of a blue coat, they wear a black coat, fine, but yeah.
And sometimes those changes make sense. Like, when they've taken what they've got, or they make sense because of it would work better for a movie
Yeah.
and the way they have to make a movie, because you have a lot more time in a book to develop a
Yes.
story.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes they go, well, this wasn't the best thing. There was a movie recently. I'm trying to think of what it was, but I feel like there was a movie that I watched recently that was based off a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, now you don't need to see the book. You don't need to read the book, because the director took all the good things about the book and turned them into this amazing movie, and all the things that were bad about the book, they changed in the movie and made it really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what that was.
Yeah.
But there's certainly situations like that. Like, I had read Life of Pi, and then I watched the movie, and I liked the movie so much more. And I was like, I need to read the book again, because I'd like.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I feel with like Sleepy Hollow. I'll watch the movie anytime, but the book, I'm like, I'm fine. I'll pass on the book.
They did cast a great Caspian. He's a perfect for voyage age Caspian. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm excited to read that book. I like books about boats.
Yeah.
Voyage the Dawn Treader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's. Wow, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts or feelings about these two? I mean, I feel like we covered them pretty much.
Not only about that, but we talked about a lot of other stuff too. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I really loved, I think just my favorite, like I had, said earlier, was just, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The one thing that really bugged me in that was just the repetition of, Lucy knew not to shut the door of the wardrobe because that wasn't safe. And then like a page later, Lucy knew not to shut the door of the wardrobe. I'm like, okay.
I thought that was strange too. I did think that was strange too. It's like, and then of course, Edmund shut it. Peter didn't shut it. Peter left it open because he knew that you're supposed to, and I was just like, they didn't go enough with that. Like, if they had gotten stuck being in the wardrobe, couldn't get out, then it would be different. But they never actually got, with Edmund closing the door, they never actually got stuck. So I felt like he could have gone a little further with that. If he's going to repeat it like that, he can go a little further with that. So I agree with you. I forgot about that. Yeah, I was going to bring that up, and I completely forgot.
Yeah, that was like, I think the most irritating thing in the book to me was just this, like, okay, you're saying the same thing over, either expand on it or don't say it so much.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, because it just seemed like he had ideas of how he wanted to use that even more, but he didn't. Yeah,
because it would have been interesting, like you had said, if they would have shut the door, and if you wanted to explain, well, then they couldn't ever leave Narnia.
I wonder if that was supposed to be like foreshadowing of what their characters were like. Like Lucy left the door open because you're supposed to leave the door open, but then Edmund didn't, and he's the one who was the troubled one. And Peter left the door open, but I don't know. Peter didn't have as much of a shift in character or a clear. Yeah.
Peter, I think, was the one that I felt was, out of the siblings, was the most flat out of all of them. I felt like there was, obviously, with Lucy and the imagination and being willing to believe everything, and then Susan and questioning things, and Edmund being the troublemaker. And I felt like there was more development there and more focus on them. It would have been nice to get to know Peter a little bit more.
I think so too. I think it would have been nice to have a little more depth to Peter, because you really didn't get much. You did get, he's like the eldest. You got the whole eldest thing, but you didn't really get much more behind his own personality or his own feelings and stuff, And that is a bit of a bummer, because we're not going to get to know him much more because he's not going back to Narnia. So, I mean, that's an easy way to kill him off.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Shell says Caspian was dreamy.
Oh, nice.
I gotta go watch that. Let's see. First Line of Voyage is fantastic. I'm excited to hear what you think about certain characters. Woohoo! I think I remember, Naomi, that you had said in something, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember that you had said that the mouse guy, it was your favorite, one of your favorite Narnia characters in general. What was his name? Started with an R. I thought there
Hmm.
was some fun little characters in this, in Prince Caspian. What was the name of that?
Yeah.
There's
Oh, I know who you're talking. What is his name? Okay, hang
um,
on. Let's see. I've got Prince Caspian here. Let's see.
but I remember Naomi mentioning somewhere that that's one of her favorite Narnia
That
characters in general.
that was a good character, and I thought that added a lot of comedic relief and stuff with that character. So I know who you're talking about. I just
Eddie
can't.
Izzard. Oh, does Eddie Izzard play the mouse? I know Shell loves Eddie Izzard. He's a comedian. Um, what is the mouse's name?
I can't remember. I'm trying
Retreat.
to kind of like flip through and see where the
There we
mouse
go.
was introduced. Yes, Reap a Cheap or something like that. Yeah, Reap Cheap.
Retreat.
So it sounds familiar, or it's very similar.
Yeah,
Yeah, to that if it's not that. But
it is
that sounds
Retreat.
right.
That's right. Yeah, and he was cute because he was very
Yes.
bold and
Yes.
and also like he didn't let his size stop him. He's always like,
Exactly.
"I'll go do it. I'll jump in there.
Mhm.
I'll do this." And he's always, "Don't you make fun of me. If you want to make fun of me, come." And it wasn't more like he wasn't being mean about it. He was like, "Dude, like test me then."
My size doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Huge
thought he was
spirit,
really,
little body. And it was just, that was really good. I really liked that one. Yeah.
yeah, I thought
Mhm.
he's so cute, but you could never tell on pain of death.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
Well, I do remember the one time where it's like, the scene in it where I thought he had died. And I was like, that is so sad. But he
Yeah.
just got back up and it's like, you know, after a little bit, I think he lost a bit of his tail too, didn't
Yes,
he?
that's right. That's right. He lost, and then Aslan gave his tail back.
Yeah. And it's like what he went through. It was like, it's just something that I went through and now let's move on to the next thing.
Shows that he was cute.
Yeah.
He would
Yes,
kill
he
you.
was.
Okay. I see. But you
Yeah.
could never tell on pain of death. Okay, so like you couldn't say he was cute because he'd kill. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. Yeah.
He was so cute. He was so
Yeah.
confident, and he was just a hero. He was a hero. He
Yes.
was like, I really liked him. Yeah. Would you think of those other awful, the other guy, the one that sold him out to the. Isn't it sad that they use hags, like older women, as being
Yeah.
the bad guys? Like, I'm
I
like,
know. I was like, why is it that it has to be an older woman that's not flowing locks and they're,
well, it's just women in general. Like, once we hit,
yeah.
menopause, we're what? Just evil creatures.
Yeah, we're already hags and stuff. Yeah. It's like,
And so, I mean, and that is the problem with some of these older books, is you get these like really outdated ways of like, well, and then the bad guys are
yeah.
old women.
Yeah.
Or, I was like, come on.
And that's definitely something you have to keep in mind as you read something that was written, so long ago. It's like, okay, this was written in the 70s or the 1800s. And they had a completely different way of thinking. So the language is going to be different. There's going to be more racism. There's going to be more sexism. There's going to be more of all of this. But now it's like, look at how far we've come where that is very much frowned upon and, and all of that.
Yeah, and having a different perspective and also having more, like, well, a perspective of women has changed. Oh, has it? So but I just was like, really? She's just so woman. Like, why is she the bad guy?
Why is she the hag? Yeah. And then it's like, oh yeah, that I saw that. I'm like, oh, eye roll, irritation. It's like, okay, but wait, this was written, how long ago was it? So this was more common back then,
Yeah. Shell said, hey, the main bad guy was a beautiful. Okay, so yeah, so the main bad guy was a beautiful woman. Still a woman, though. So a woman over puberty. Like, I mean, over the bad, of course, it's still a woman. Oh, C.S. Lewis. Letting his sexism show. Oh, jeez.
Mhm.
Let's see. I heard it as Weepacheep, but I didn't look to
Yeah.
see what it was in the book. Oh, Reepacheep. Yeah, I could see that. Reepacheep, Weepacheep. They sound the same.
Mhm.
Yeah,
The
but you're
other
right.
name that I really liked when listening to it and reading was Knickerbrick. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
Nickelbrick, the bad one, the one
just a
that
fun name.
it was a fun name.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Knickerbrick had a lot of kind of a bit of spunk too.
I think he was the one that sold him out, wasn't he?
I think so.
There was Powder Twig was the squirrel. I think it was Nickelbrick. That is a fun name. They had some really cute names in here too.
Mhm.
It was
Well, you got to keep attention of some kids that minds can wander. So fun names would be a great way to keep them in.
Shell
That's
says,
a definitely cool little trick.
yeah.
To the
Two of the
heroes were one.
no, they were prepubescent girl shell.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I need to let C.S. Lewis alone. He's not here anymore anyways to defend himself.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. It's when it's written too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. um yeah, no, there were a lot of fun little, and that's like the whimsy of it is the cute little
Mm-hmm.
names they had, the types of animals they had, like the dryads,
Yeah.
like and this the trees. I loved when the trees
Mhm.
came to life and they looked like humans. I really liked that
Mhm.
scene actually where Lucy was like, and this one would look like this, and this tree would be this. I thought that was kind of cute.
Well, and how, when she walked into the forest at the first time she was, thinking she saw Aslan, and then to get to Aslan the first time when she walked in, it was those thoughts of if the forest and the trees have that feeling of being alive. And I thought that was very cool,
Yeah, kind of a bit of nature writing too. Then like.
Mhm.
What? Yeah, I like that. Let's see. Naomi
Mhm.
says dwarves are on the witch's side, so there's a history of that. Yeah, and that is true for sure. And so I did think that was interesting that the dwarves were so aligned with the creatures like the badger and all the different
Mhm.
because dwarves had initially been on the witch's side. So I thought
Mhm.
it made sense that Nickabrack brought
Mhm.
the old hag and the werewolf and was trying to get them to bring the witch back. But
Mhm.
I did think it was like over all that time, it was interesting that they aligned with the dwarves. I guess it was like, let's all band together against this common enemy of
Yeah.
what were they called? The tree, something, like the people that were from that.
Well, and it was interesting too to see how it's like you had the dwarves and everyone on the side of the witch, and it's like, she wasn't so bad. She did a lot of good for our species and things like that. And it's like you can have someone that is the most evil person in the world, but there can be this group of people that he treats really, really well.
Right.
You know,
And because she did well by the dwarves and
yeah,
the other people that were the bad guys in the first book.
hmm,
And so for
yeah,
them, they're like, well, she was fine for us, but she turned everybody else into stone. And
yep,
so obviously, it just depends. It's a matter of perspective too,
yeah,
and who gets the best side of the
hmm,
evil witch.
yeah, yep,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah,
So we got to figure out when we're going to do our next live show,
yeah,
but we can talk that through at some point soon.
yeah.
And but yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I really like
It
the
was.
idea, Naomi, of us doing a watch along
Mhm.
after we finish the series. I think that would be a lot of fun.
That would be a lot of fun.
I'll see if I can figure out how we can do that.
Hmm.
And yeah, so the next couple of books are Dawn Treader, and Silver Chair, right? Yes.
Yes, I believe so. I think, yeah.
And we're going to be doing the live show on your channel.
Hmm. Yep, it'll be on my channel. I have to figure it out. It'll be the first time I'm doing a live show on my channel. So,
That'll be exciting. Yeah.
yeah.
We can do some practice, like if you have want to do anything like a practice sprints or something like that on your channel, we
Oh,
could
that'd be
always do
good.
that. Try that out.
Okay.
Yeah. So everybody, make sure you subscribe to Christine. I put it in the description box down below. I put her channel information on there, so make sure you subscribe so that when we have all that information, you can quickly see all the updates and all the information for
Hmm.
our next live show, which will be probably either at the end of this month or sometime at the beginning in August.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. We'll
Figure that out.
finalize that and definitely, try and let you know in a video or something like that. So,
Definitely. So thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
it was. Thank you for doing this. This was fun.
I really appreciate you asking me to do this
Mhm.
because I have wanted to read this series, but I just, if I don't make it a thing, it won't happen.
Right.
So I'm excited. And now
Yeah.
I'm excited about all these adaptations and stuff, like, and listening
Yeah.
to the radio dramas. That sounds like fun.
It does. That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to be looking into that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. On a rainy, it's not rainy anymore,
Yeah.
but that'd be good for a rainy day, listening to the radio dramas and yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody who's participated with us and, coming and
Mhm.
chatting with us about these. I'm glad that you guys are reading it with us and
Yeah.
be excited to go on to the next two books and see where this
Mhm.
adventure takes us.
Mhm.
And I think that's pretty much. Is there anything else you wanted to?
No, just keep joining in and, yeah.
Okay. Well, we will see you later. Bye.
Bye.